Hello, everyone, and good morning. Welcome to 2020 Technology Trends hosted by Mars Solutions Group. Today, during Merri's presentation, you all will be muted to reduce background noise. There's a chat where I submitted a chat already, so you should see a notification for it where you can submit any questions you have during the presentation, and we'll have a question and answer portion at the end where you could also unmute yourself as well if you'd prefer to do it that way. There will be contact information for any questions that we can't address at the end due to time restraints. But welcome, we're glad to see everyone here. I'd like to go ahead and introduce our speaker, Merri Beckfield. So Merri Beckfield is a client success manager at Mars. Merri has over 25 years of experience in business information systems and technology. Over the course of her career, her roles have included systems development, system analysis and design, project management, data management, program management, and systems support. We are delighted to have her speak on 2020 technology trends today. Without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Merri.
Thanks, Christine. Welcome, everybody. I'm really excited to be here and to be sharing this material with you today. Before we dive into it, I want to explain a little bit about why I'm so passionate about this. I think you all have had or know of those moments in life when a major historical event happens, and forever thereafter, you can always recall when someone asks you, hey, where were you when? So where were you when the space shuttle exploded? Where were you when you learned Princess Diana had died? Well, for me, technology is like that as well. And it didn't seem at the time like I was experiencing a major historical moment. It was in the early 90s and I was working for Oscar Mayer, and a coworker brought in, I don't know, Popular Mechanics or Scientific American, something like that, just a magazine, and was telling all of us about this article in the magazine. So it seemed like an innocuous office conversation about this article. And what he was sharing is this article was saying that in the future, we would all have phones in our cars. And remember, this is 1990-ish. We would have phones in our bathrooms. And we could take phones wherever we wanted, and they would be constantly with us. To this day, I remember that conversation vividly. My reaction was just visceral. It was no way. So in part, I couldn't imagine this technology, but also I didn't really think this was a good thing. Like, I'm not sure I want a phone in my car. I kind of like to get away from the phone at times. I don't want it in the bathroom, right? But I still remember that. And what it taught me was how important it was to really pay attention to the evolving technology. Not all of it is going to come to fruition, but much of it does, just like phones today do. And I think many of us now couldn't imagine not having cell phones and mobile phones for all of the convenience. But I do have to tell you, anytime I'm in a public restroom and someone has their phone and they're talking on it, I flash back to that day. Even though it didn't seem like a major historic conversation at the time, for me it really was. All right, so let's dive into it. As I was preparing this material, I watch the trends on a regular basis. I read articles, listen to podcasts, whatever. There is so much out there. It just feels overwhelming. So I was trying to figure out how to organize it. And it came to me as I was looking at the different technologies that they tended, the major technology trends right now tend to fall into one of three buckets. The first bucket being technology that is foundational, and foundational technology that is really changing the technology foundations that we have in place today. Now, some of that is being driven by the next category, which is the need to continually improve and develop further in how we utilize technology to get more value out of it for mankind. So maybe we're trying to solve how to treat cancer, some of these big problems that we're wrestling with as humans. We're trying to get more value out of our technology, which is driving the need to further press the limits of the foundations we have today. But also, we all would like technology that makes our lives easier or our work lives easier. So that's another bucket, are these applications and technologies that are coming out to make things so much easier for all of us, so that you don't necessarily have to be a technology whiz to be able to use the technology. And then finally, all of that is driving a whole series of technologies that are necessary to continue to make sure that everything is secured as well as used appropriately. So we get into discussions around ethics and data privacy. So these are the three buckets that we're going to walk through. So the foundational technology, what is happening there, some of the foundations that we have in place today are really about to be kind of shaken to their core. And then we'll take a look at what are some of the things that we will actually see that are so different from what we have today in terms of technology from a value and an ease perspective. And then finally, we'll talk about security and ethic implications. All right, so let's get into the foundational technology. And what you will probably first think is you look over and you say, AI, machine learning. Well, that's not new. Not necessarily. AI has been around for a while, but we're going to talk why am I including it as a trend and what's about to happen there. The second category of foundational technologies that are changing, things like quantum computing, 5D and 5G. So these are things that are going to be enabling some capabilities we don't have today. So we'll dive a bit into that. And then finally, we've all heard about the cloud, but there's some evolution to the cloud as we know it today, starting to be necessary. So distributed cloud, edge computing, so we'll touch on that as well. All right, so if I did a pop quiz right now, I think many of you would probably be able to give a decent definition of what artificial intelligence is, just right off the top of your head. No matter what profession you're in, you probably have a good sense of what that might be at a high level. And machine learning, but if I asked you, are they the same or different, it might be a little bit more difficult to clearly differentiate them because they aren't the same. So let's talk about what that is. The terms are often used interchangeably these days. You'll see them in articles, you see them all over the news, but really what is the difference between the two? So let's just start with AI. Artificial intelligence is the simulation of human intelligence by a machine. It's really the capability of a machine or a computer to imitate intelligence. That's why I like the picture on the left, because it really shows what we're trying to do. We're trying to recreate our brains with hardware, instead of cells. We're trying to recreate ourselves in a computer form. I think what is different, because AI has been around a long time, but what is different now with AI is the breadth of it. It keeps expanding. So it isn't just creating a computer like Watson that can beat somebody on Jeopardy. So some of those intellectual capabilities, but it's also like being able to do facial recognition. So now we're going beyond just the pure brain, but imitating what our eyes do. Natural language processing is imitating how do we interpret speech and language. So think of Alexa and Siri, right? So AI is continuing to evolve to not only mimic things like how do we logically think through or answer questions on Jeopardy, but also the whole human experience. Now, machine learning is, let me see if I can move this down. The differentiation here is machine learning is a subset of artificial intelligence. And the actions of the machines are based on learning, not coding. So for me, when I first heard of artificial intelligence, I thought it was, probably because I came from this background, I thought it was some really smart computer scientists and programmers out there writing lines and lines of code for every possible condition that could be presented. It's actually not. What machine learning is we have now evolved to not only mimicking our brains and how they think, but also how our brains learn as we are children. So if you look at this robot on here, it's going to learn how to play basketball just like a child would learn. So when I was learning to play basketball as a child, I'd try to throw the ball at the hoop, and if I first threw it too soft and it went under the net, like, okay, well, next time I'm going to take that feedback and I'm going to throw it harder. then it probably bounced right off that backboard, right? And I'd have to run back in the gym, get the ball, come back, try to get it just right to go through the hoop. That is the same way that we now have developed for robots to learn. And that is what machine learning is all about. It is having the machines actually learn from feedback and learn from observations that they make and adjust their behavior based on that. So they are learning just like we learned and not by coding. I think for me, the interesting thing that I learned about machine learning within the past year, I read a book by Amy Webb called The Big Nine. And it's a fabulous book, by the way, because she does a great job of explaining the history of artificial intelligence, the breakthroughs that have happened recently in the past 4 or 5 years to make it really commercially viable, who drove those breakthroughs. And she explains really well about machine learning. The startling thing that I learned in that book, though, was we now have algorithms and bots that they're learning based on data they're given. They're learning in a different way than we learned, right? We learned from our parents or our brothers or sisters correcting us or giving us feedback, things we tried. They're learning based on a data set, and then they're learning based on their own feedback. We now have algorithms that the people who created the machine learning can't actually understand how the machines got to the conclusion they got to, why they're taking the action they are taking. And what's more startling to me is they haven't been able to reverse engineer how the bots learned what they learned and got where they got. So it's a little bit scary. The promise of it, though, is the bots and the machine learning and the AI are going to look at problems differently than we do and come up with solutions that we might not have thought of. So that is the good side of it. The bad side is they may go down a path we don't desire, and we may not be able to understand how they got there or control it as well as we would like. So there's a lot going on in this space between these. Now, with machine learning and artificial intelligence, if I would give you a quiz right now and say, hey, where is machine learning in your life? Is it commonplace? Is it not? Can you name 5 things where AI or machine learning are just embedded in your everyday life? What about 10? Actually, there's probably hundreds in a daily life. So if you think about it, Siri and Alexa, those are applications of machine learning and AI. Netflix, showing you things that you would like to see. Spotify, booking a flight. I think we all are pretty familiar that social media determining what to show you is based on AI and machine learning. One that I didn't think of right off the top of my head is when you use Apple Maps or Google Maps, there's actually machine learning and AI in there. I was just thinking of it, hey, it's just a map. Nope, this is behind the scenes. When you go out to a website, let's say you go out to Amazon or you go out to Barnes & Noble, and it's showing you recommendations or things you might like to see, there are machine learning algorithms that play there as well. So those are some of the more obvious things. Less obvious, if you use the portrait mode on your Apple iPhone, that has machine learning in it. Anytime, thankfully, anytime you use your credit card, the financial institutions are way far advanced in a lot of this stuff, and they are using machine learning to learn what your normal buying patterns are and habits are, and recognizing when there are anomalies. So I would say it was maybe 5 years ago, maybe even further, we actually got a call from our credit card company saying, hey, were you in Canada, today, and did you just buy $5,000 worth of men's clothing in Toronto? Because that was so far outside of our normal buying pattern that the machine learning, even that long ago, was able to recognize it as an anomaly. So anytime you use your credit card, there's machine learning and AI application in the background. And probably the most helpful AI and machine learning in all of our daily lives deals with our email, the spam filters. I don't know if you've noticed, but you probably get less spam than you used to. Doesn't mean the rate of spam has gone down drastically. It's gone down some, but it actually means the machines and the bots are learning and quickly adapting and filtering out the stuff that you don't want to see. All right, so those are just some examples. So it's pretty ubiquitous and it's pretty far advanced, but it's going to, because of the capabilities of machine learning and where we're going, it is going to continually make major changes in our lives. The autonomous vehicles, they're coming. All of that sort of stuff is coming. So more to come on this trend. Keep your eye on it. All right, so what the heck is this thing, right? It's kind of pretty. You know, I kind of like the colors, but it doesn't look like anything I have ever seen before myself. Some of you may have seen pictures of this before, but many of you maybe have not. This is a quantum computer. Not only does it not look like anything we've seen before, it doesn't work like what we've seen before. So traditional computers, I think many of us are used to thinking of them as, hey, there's at the core of it, there's a circuit that's either on or off. It's a 0 or a 1. It works, you know, just in a very binary, it's either on or off kind of mode. The first time I heard about quantum computing, I was watching a TED Talk, and it was something about learning quantum computing in 10 minutes. I don't know, it's very short, very basic, but it kind of blew my mind because the example the presenter gave was, well, how do you determine the percentage of a coin flip, right? It either lands on heads or tails, just like a computer, right? It's a 0 or 1, pretty easy. Quantum computers can take it a step further. They work based on atoms, so not at all based on technology today. And they don't just have an on or an off state. They can actually do predictions where, wait a minute, what if the coin is both? How can it be a head or a tail? Well, I guess if it lands on its side, right? So very different thinking, very different way of processing problems and data. So if I compare the two, traditional computing is going to be based on zeros or ones. Most of the things I've read on this are saying traditional computing will remain. Quantum computing isn't going to replace it. Traditional computing has served us well. We use it all over the place. Lots of our usual daily needs will still be met by traditional computing. But we're hitting the limits on it. So in astrophysics, trying to figure out how to solve cancer, some of these really big problems, no matter how big our traditional computing is, we are hitting the limits because everything has to be in one state or another. Quantum computing, because of the base on how atoms are, can actually have multiple different states for just one little, I'm going to call it a byte, just for equivalency's sake. So it gives us much more possibility when we go to try to solve a problem. So it's really going to supplement the high end of our traditional computing. So it's really for those high power needs. So keep your eye on it. There's a lot of interesting stuff out there. It's really starting to gain some momentum. So you'll want to just learn a little more about it and understand it a little bit. It's pretty fascinating, just because it is so darn different. How about this? What on earth is this? It's not very big. It looks like a piece of glass. It's actually a piece of quartz. So just like with the computing power, where our traditional processors and memory can't quite meet the needs of some of our higher end problems, as we try to solve things that require bigger and larger data sets, Microsoft and others have realized that, wait a minute, we're not, with our current technology, we're not going to have enough space, enough warehouse space, enough server farm space, whatever, for all of the data storage we need. So we need to find a better way to keep it, a smaller way to keep it. And what this is 5D. So you might not have heard of 5D, but it is laser optics that are engraved on quartz glass that actually allow each tiny dot on there to have 5 dimensions. It's length, width, and height, just like our traditional recording mechanisms are today, but also the quality of the light that reflects off of that tiny piece of engraving, as well as, I think, the length of it, length or density of the light. So you can engrave a whole lot more on one tiny piece of quartz glass. And the great news is it also doesn't degrade over time. Like, it's not going to degrade for 1,000 years. So compare that to this. So this is actually a picture that Microsoft had published. This is their Project Silica. So you can see on the right, the lady is holding a piece of quartz that has the entire Superman movie from Warner Brothers engraved on that tiny piece of quartz instead of on these 5 film canisters that are prone to degrading over time. So pretty impressive technology. I just found it interesting that people are already thinking about the fact that, hey, the disk drives, even though they've gotten smaller, the way we store data, it degrades and it's still not small enough. So there will be more coming with this as well. So we talked about 5G. Or 5D. What about 5G? So you may have seen signs or articles like 5G is coming. You'll see it from all the big cell phone providers. And at first, when I saw it, I didn't think much about it because we'd gone from 3G to 4G, you know, it got faster, more reliable. So I'm thinking 5G is just more of the same, just faster and even more reliable. But 4G is pretty darn good already. But I dug into it because I was really curious, like, what's the big deal? Why are they making such a big deal out of this? Well, the big deal is with speeds, the download speeds are 10 to 100 to even 1,000 times faster than some of the cell capabilities today. And it's going to be even more reliable. Here's the big aha. On the left, you see a laptop with one of those little blue Ethernet cords on it. I don't know about you, but I haven't used one of those cords in a really long time to connect my laptop or my devices to the internet, right? You go to Starbucks, you're not looking around for one of those cords. You check into a hotel, you go to your hotel room, you don't have to go find the little bag in the closet that has the cord in it anymore, right? At some point, those little cords just pretty much disappeared from our life, right? Unless your computer in your office still happens to have one. Because Wi-Fi came along and all of our laptops, phones are Wi-Fi enabled. So typically we don't plug into the wall anymore, especially when we're in public. We go out and we just log on to the Wi-Fi. Okay, well, 5G has the promise to do the same thing for the devices in our home that we still connect with coax. So think about your TV. What if your TV could just operate off of basically Wi-Fi and the signals coming through the air? What about your modem? Wouldn't it be nice if you didn't have to have that plugged into the wall all the time as well? So the promise here is that your internet, your cable at home can become just like Wi-Fi became for our PCs. The same thing can happen with 5G now for those additional devices that always have that higher bandwidth need and higher capabilities for downloads and uploads. So that truly is going to be revolutionary in terms of how data gets delivered to each of us and to all of our devices. All right, moving on to the last group of foundational technologies. They're all dealing with the cloud. In case you haven't seen it, this is actually the inside of a Google data center in 2012. And as you can see, it's just a lot of hardware, right? And it does processing for us all. It's a place for us to store our stuff. But as we've used this technology and learned about it, we've realized there are some shortcomings. The whole concept with the cloud is make the compute power, make the storage just like the electric company or the utility company, right? You and I don't have to have many generators in our basement or windmills in our yard or solar panels on a roof. I mean, we could, but we don't have to because we have a utility company that delivers electricity to our house whenever we need it. We pay for it when we use it. We don't pay for it when we don't use it. That is the whole concept of why the cloud is revolutionary. That is the concept here. You know what? Compute power can be the same way. Now, what we've learned is as we've started attaching more and more devices to the cloud, so our watches, our smartwatches, our phones, all of these other devices, it's like, well, there are some downsides to it Because unlike the utility company, the cloud I'm using, the Google data center or the Microsoft data center, whoever's data center it is, might be 10 states away from me. The power company's not that far. It's in the next county over, right? So we've realized there's some latency and certain scenarios where it doesn't make sense for the data to move that far. So refining this technology is what these two additional terms that are trending now mean. So distributed cloud just means, wait a minute, we need to put these computer utility spaces a little closer sometimes to where the data is going to be needed. Edge computing is saying, you know what, there are certain cases where I don't even want to have to send my data somewhere. I would like the device to be able to do it. So the device that's connected to the edge of the network, I would love to have them be able to do some of that computing right in the device without going back to the cloud or only going back when it needs to. So I'm showing a security camera here because so let's say you have a company where it has facial recognition to get in the door. You don't want to have that latency of sending that to the cloud and coming back. You might just want it to be able to process that instantaneously, open the door, let you in because it recognized your face. So that's what edge computing is all about. So it's really making some deliberate decisions about where we process the data and being smart about where the cloud computing storage and processing facilities are. All right, so we have talked about the foundational technology changes that are coming, really around how do we enable things with AI and machine learning and make processing more like humans would process it. And then we talked about the fact that, you know, in order to do that and to solve some of these problems, we need a different kind of computer and computing power. And we need different kinds of storage devices. It needs to be smaller, things need to be faster, and we need to be smart about this utility concept to make sure we have things in the right place. So these things together are coming together to really transform and completely change how we have done computing up to this point. And why are we doing all of that? As I said before, it's because we want to enable things. We need to get more value and ease out of what we have thus to this point. So from a value and ease perspective, there are trends for robots, RPA, and cobots that we're going to talk about briefly. Another category of things coming out in the value and ease space, you will hear the term democratization, you'll hear voice, you'll hear natural language processing. What this is all about is just making it easy for all of us to use this sophisticated technology and not have it be limited to people who have deep expertise in it. And then finally, I'm sure you're all aware of the trends around autonomous vehicles, Internet of Things. Those have been really well covered in the media, but one that you may not have seen is digital twins, and that is really set to change how things are done from an industry perspective or industrial perspective. So we'll spend a little time talking about that as well. All right, so let me spend a little bit of time on robots, robotic process automation, and cobots. So a while ago, I used to think of a robot as a physical thing, and there are still those robots out there. But now we've also come to the point where we have software robots. So they're virtual robots. And it's really all about processing things with software, with machine learning, just like a human would process it. So RPA is all about mimicking, let's say, the keystrokes and the decisions a person would make in a day to eliminate the need for people to do certain tedious tasks. So maybe it's processing invoices, processing accounts payable. What are those tasks that are very repetitive that someone can mimic the keystrokes as well as some of the basic simple decisions that a human makes and do those to free the human up to do other types of work. Now, the odd thing with RPA and robotic process automation is I was working at a company a couple years ago where we were implementing RPA, and you're actually encouraged to name your robot, your virtual robot coworker, give them a name, and then they become your cobot or your coworker. I personally am not ready for that. But you'll see those terms. That's what it's about. For me, the best way I found to understand what these virtual robots do and how they learn was to watch this video. It came out as a TED Talk that came out probably 2-3 years ago now, all about work Johns Hopkins University was doing with robots and machine learning to tackle one of the really difficult things to diagnose, and very deadly if you don't diagnose it soon enough in medicine, which is sepsis. Don't do it now, but I highly encourage you, if you have not seen this video, take the 17 minutes sometime in the next couple of days, watch this video for 2 reasons. One, she does a great job of explaining how machine learning happens and how these bots learn and how they actually make that happen. So some really smart people have figured out how to make that happen, right? So there's a piece in here that covers that. But then what's even more amazing is the application of the machine learning to this medical problem and the results they've been able to have and the potential implications for making things better for mankind. It's a nice counterbalance to some of the concerns we all have about AI and machine learning. It is actually highlighting some of the good use that it is going to. So take some time, check that out. Highly recommend it. The second category of value and use items that I wanted to cover are voice, natural language processing, and democratization. So what is this all about? I didn't really think too much about it deliberately. It's just evolved. I think like many of you, wow, it got easier to give voice commands in my car. My phone has come so far in the past 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, right? These things are amazing how well it recognizes voices these days. But the potential and the real revolution here is it's already revolutionized how we interact with things, right? But the real potential is, I would say, in the business world, it's hit our home lives pretty impactfully, right? You can reorder stuff through Alexa. You can go on, get instructions from Siri. These voice things are pretty easy for us to use in our homes. Think about what if in a year or so, the CFO walks in her office in the morning and says, "Hey, Alexa," or whomever, "what should I worry about today?" And this little device comes back and says, "Well, sales are down in the northeast part of the country. I think we need to dig into that." CFO is not digging through a report or a spreadsheet anymore. She's being guided by machine learning and algorithms that are doing that work and coming back with recommendations on what we need to focus on, may even come back with recommendations on actions to take. So think about that potential. That hit me a couple of years ago when I read a Gartner Trend report specifically around business intelligence and analytics, because that's the field I'm in, where they predicted by 2023, which isn't very far away, reports as we know them today will go away. Now that might be an aggressive prediction, might not be, but I could easily, instantly, when I read that, envision the scenario where, wait a minute, the CFO, the finance people, they're not going to have to dig through reports because this technology does have the promise of delivering that. Obviously, we have a ways to go with some of our processes and data to make sure they don't provide misleading information, but the potential is there. It's coming. So keep your eye on that trend. Okay, so what the heck is this? This is a digital twin. It's a depiction of a digital twin. And what a digital twin is it's a replica of a physical object or process, device, or person. And what makes it different than just a graphic representation in a computer simulation with AI machine learning, it then exhibits the elements and dynamics of that object. So let me give you an example. So in the past, if you wanted to see how a ship would react to certain waves on an ocean, people would build a replica scale model, might be 10 feet long, and put it in a big, huge wave tank, simulate the waves, and then see what would happen to that ship. All right, so we did it physically. We'd have to build prototypes of planes to see what they would do when they flew. We would have to build prototypes of boats to see what would happen to them in the ocean. What digital twins do is, if we do it right and they have these elements and dynamics and they exhibit the same behavior of the actual object, you can now simulate all of that without building the physical model. You could learn a lot about the behavior of that object before you actually built it physically. So saving time and money. So that's what this is here. It's showing an engine or a turbine or something in this room, not only showing what it would look like if you added it to the room, but it's going to exhibit the same behavior. So will the temperatures in the room go up? You know, what's the impact going to be on the power to the room? That sort of thing. What I also find interesting is with digital twins, you can replicate people. So in the material I've included at the end, there's a link to an article by an organization that is actually talking about the use of digital twins to understand the impact of certain cancer treatments on people before we actually give them to people. So keep your eye on that. Interesting, fascinating, exciting stuff. And I find it just as fascinating to think about how the wonderful, smart, creative people come up with the whole idea of a digital twin to begin with. It's amazing. Okay, so we're going to talk for a couple minutes on security and ethics. So as you think about AI and machine learning and, you know, these bots and this software, and you think about all this technology and moving data around faster, processing it bigger, there are still bad actors in the world. We still need to take care of security. So cybersecurity is still a trending topic from a technology perspective. It needs to evolve as fast or faster than all of these other technologies. So that's one trend in the security and ethics bucket. Another one is blockchain. You've probably seen the terminology, but let's talk a little bit about what it is and what the promise is with blockchain. And then the implications of all of this of data ethics, which isn't actually a technology, but it's a practice and an evolving practice that we need to focus on. It has to be a trend so that we use all of this capability and power and data to the betterment of mankind versus the opposite. So a couple of quick things for you. Just really quick, you don't have to answer, just think through it in your head. What do you think the percent of email traffic that was spam was in March 2020? Yeah, I mentioned how we have machine learning in the background reducing all the spam that we would all get. According to Statistica, it was 54% of email traffic. So you can be thankful that your mailbox isn't twice the size and you don't have to wade through all that spam in a day. The average data breach globally cost $3.9 billion in US dollars, according to IBM. And what's interesting to me is that on average, it's only about 25,000 records that are stolen in each breach, but $3.9 million. So obviously we need to get better at that. And then 53%, this is a true statement, 53% of companies had over 1,000 sensitive files open to every employee. I don't know about you, but I would really like that to be at 100%. So this was from Veritas, a finding that they had. So we have a long way to go in terms of cybersecurity and making it more effective for all of us. And one aspect of cybersecurity to remember is it's not just about keeping the bad guys out. It also is work to make sure we all have valid access and we prevent unauthorized access. So the two-factor authentication that you're seeing nowadays, some of the other technologies that companies are playing with to try to make sure that it is you accessing your phone and not someone else. There's a lot going on there continually to evolve that technology. Second, cybersecurity is about complying and ensuring compliance with regulation, right? So the HIPAA laws, the global data protection regulation in Europe, there's a lot emerging there because as we have data breaches occur, as we have things that upset us from a data protection and security perspective, in some cases, laws and regulations result, and we need to be able to comply with that. So there's a lot going on in that space. And then finally, we want to make sure that we meet or exceed privacy and confidentiality expectations, right? So on the scene comes blockchain in the financial sector. The promise of blockchain is that it is a technology that evolved from Bitcoin and processing Bitcoin. It is not the same as Bitcoin, but the promise is we want to deliver trusted data. We want to make sure the data is right. And we want to make sure it's tamper resistant so that people can't get at it. So really getting to some of that privacy concern, making sure the data is right. You and I wouldn't be very happy if we logged into our bank account and the data was wrong, right? So this hit the financial industry first and is really making huge changes and having a revolutionary impact there. You can think of it as a secure method. It's really secured with cryptography and encryption to exchange transactions used for more than Bitcoin. It's more secure and it's traceable. So now it's going beyond the financials. There, you can go out and study and learn that there are applications of blockchain in the food supply chain. So being able to trace where the lettuce came from that got to the grocery store so that we have effective recalls and we don't have as many instances where all of the romaine lettuce has to be pulled because we don't know where the lettuce came from, right? Now, when you look at this diagram on the right, one of the things that makes blockchain impressive is that as data is put into a block, so you have a transaction, I'm a person, I make a transaction, it's written to a block, and that block gets stored on a piece of hardware, but it's not necessarily stored with all of the rest of the related blocks of data. It's distributed across different hardware. So if you think about that from a hacking perspective, you can't just hack into one machine and get all the data because all of the records are in blocks in different hardware. So that's at a really high level, one of the things that makes it more tamper resistant. And I'm not a blockchain expert, but I would say keep your eye on this. It's been in the financial sector. You'll see it evolving into more and more common use because of the great potential. We've all seen data breaches. We know that there are data ethics that we need to have in place. Many people aren't very happy with Facebook and the fact that data, we felt like they were protecting our data, but it got shared with Cambridge Analytica. Obviously, they're not the only people that have had a data breach. Lots of people have. It's pretty commonplace. But I think the piece, as we go after that, I think the piece that's trending now with data ethics and that you'll see more and more talk of is a subset of data ethics. It's this. So data use and visualization and reporting on it, sharing data in a public forum with other people is getting attention because people too often create misleading charts. People don't always realize how they can be misled. So you'll see the words data literacy a lot in the media now and trending a lot. And it is to make sure that we are holding people accountable to ethically showing data. So if you look on the left and you quickly glance at it and you see the text in the middle, it says, oh, Florida enacted its Stand Your Ground law in 2005. And look, gun deaths in Florida went way down. That's amazing. But if you look closer, the y-axis is actually opposite of what most of us would expect, right? So when you orient it that way, it tells a completely different story. And you can find examples of this in the media, at work, all over the place on a daily basis. So watch this trend. There will be more and more emphasis on making sure people are ethically sharing data, and not even, in some cases, not even deliberate. In this case, it maybe was deliberate to tell a story a certain way, but in many cases, it's not even deliberate. People just don't know some of the basics of good data ethics and stewardship. All right, so quick recap. We talked about the foundational technologies that are really coming of age now, being commercially viable, going to completely change the way we do things. We talked about value and ease, and we talked about the implications on security and ethics and the trends there. You're probably thinking, okay, so what? That's all been nice and informational, but great, what am I supposed to do with all this now? Put a couple quotes in. We are going through the fourth industrial revolution, whether we realize it or not. This stuff is going to completely change the way we process data and do our processes. It is, according to Gartner, going to change every aspect of our existence. This is how pivotal this point in time is with technology. So what's your role in it? You know, I mentioned that we now have AI and machine learning to the point where humans aren't always directly in the loop. They can't necessarily reverse engineer what the machines did. Are we okay with that? Like, you need to get involved in the conversation and educated and familiar with this to a certain degree. None of us are going to be experts in it, right? There are a few people in the world that are, and maybe some of you are, but I am not, nor do I ever expect myself to be. But I do need to be thinking about these things and having a say in it. And what's our motivation for it? Is it aligned with the best long-term interests of humanity? So, great. Now, those are kind of big problems to tackle individually, right? But we need to tackle some of this together. We need to think about it together. And, you know, you're all thinking, oh my gosh, I got a day job, I've got to watch after the kids. Like, how do you ever find time to keep up with this stuff, let alone take some action and get involved? Well, keeping up. My recommendation is know just enough, right? I don't know stuff super deep, but I know enough, and I know who knows, and that is what I would recommend. It's just my way of keeping up is I know just enough. I know who knows. I'm not going to hold myself accountable to know it all. I'm going to try to make it easy on myself. I'm encouraging all of you to do something today that your future self's going to thank you for. So how do you know just enough? You know, at least once a year, read the annual trend reports that come out from Gartner, or Bernard Marr puts a lot out on technology trends. He's a futurist. Those are easy ways to just very quickly, you know, spend an hour just once a year kind of understanding what's going on and thinking about it and understanding the implications. Know who knows, you know, get a broad network, get involved in online communities on any of this technology that interests you or fascinates you. Just don't be shy. Ask people like, hey, I don't understand. I'm not sure. I'd like to learn more. You'll be amazed at what people will share. Everyone wants to help everybody else learn this stuff. Make it easy on yourself. Look, listen, follow, and learn. To do that, here's what I do. Look and learn. Yeah, I watch YouTube videos. Here are some of the ones that I would recommend on some of the things we've talked about here. The IBM blockchain, what is blockchain? They have at that site 5 one-minute videos to help you understand it. 5 minutes or even a minute isn't all that much time to gain a basic understanding. And then you can share that information with others and help spread the knowledge and the learning. So looking and learning can be super easy. Listening and learning can take more. So the Big 9 from Amy Webb, I actually listened to on Audible. So it took some time and investment of time. Highly recommend the book. I get nothing for saying that, by the way. So here are just a couple books on AI and machine learning that might be interesting. You can listen to podcasts. There's lots of free and low-cost training out there today. So I've listed some of the sites where you can get free or really low-cost training on this stuff if you want to dive deep. Follow and learn. This has been one of my favorite ways. It's like learning by osmosis. I follow certain people on LinkedIn or Twitter, and then just look at it maybe 5 or 10 minutes a day. Sometimes I get sucked in and it takes more, to be honest. But you can follow Ali Miller from Amazon. She's a data scientist there, lead data scientist. You can learn a lot from following her, Bernard Marr. Any of these people here, there are many more. But again, just even in a tweet or a LinkedIn article, you can learn a ton in a very short time. So I'm a big fan of following and learning because I'm learning a ton about trends and technology just by osmosis. All right. So if nothing else, hopefully this has helped you understand or pick up a few more trends that you weren't aware of. And if nothing else, if you don't spend time learning and getting involved on this technology for yourself, do it for the future generations. I think many people who are very familiar with where we're going with some of this technology are both excited about the possibility of what we can do with the technology, but at the same time, very concerned that if we don't do this right, if we don't pay attention to it and do this right, we are not going to leave the right legacy to the next generation. So do it for them. All right. With that, I'll turn it back to Christine, who's going to moderate the question and answer. And I just want to say thank you for listening. Hope you've picked up a couple of things here and there. Christine?
Thank you so much, Merri. That was really insightful, and I learned a lot, like I always do from you. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, so like Merri mentioned, we're going to open this up to Q&A. You can either write in the chat, message me, I'm the Mars Solutions name in the sidebar, message me privately and I can ask the question for you, or you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask Merri a question. I believe we do have one question to begin with. Megan, you have a question?
Yeah. So Merri, since there are a ton of different trends going on right now, if we had limited time, like what would be your recommendation to focus on?
Yeah, for me, I probably gave it away a little bit in the presentation. I would say I am really focusing right now just personally on AI and machine learning, and I think a lot of people are, because it's so foundational to everything and it has such implications that no matter who you are in your walk of life, I think it's going to be in our best interest to all learn a lot more about it and take part in shaping the future of it so that it goes down a path that we want it to go down. And I could draw the parallel to social media. Like, social media has gone down a path. Some of us may or may not agree with the path it's gone down, but I don't know that, I think it just evolved that way without all of us kind of taking an active role with AI and machine learning. I think we do really want to make sure that we understand it to a certain degree and are involved in the conversation. And if we need to, that we're having those conversations about, wait, how is this going to be used? Is there going to be any regulation over it? Do we want to just let it be, evolve however it evolves? So that would be my recommendation. And there's a lot of material out there, and you can pick stuff up pretty quick on it and see where it's going and where it's evolved to. And for me, when I dug into it and I realized how prevalent it already is in our daily lives, some of that's nice, but some of it's like, wait a minute, it already got to this point, and a lot of us haven't even really been involved. We've just been recipients of it.
Yeah, thank you. That makes a lot of sense.
Thanks for that question, Megan. I'm getting a few comments to me in the chat, but I don't have any other questions right now. For all of the participants, do we have any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself and ask now.
And I would also encourage, if you have some comments on some of the material or different resources you found helpful, or you want to correct anything I've said, feel free. That's why we're here, just to learn.
Hi, Merri. This is Anjana here.
Hi.
Hi. Just wanted to thank you because I personally have felt overwhelmed multiple times trying get a grasp of various technologies and the trends. So I just wanted to thank you for putting things in perspective for all of us.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for your comment. I hope it helps. Really do.
Barry, we do have a request for a focused AI/ML session in the future, so we'll be talking about that.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. Great suggestion. Any other suggestions? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Christy.
I was going to say the exact same thing. Any other suggestions or questions for Merri?
Okay. If not, we haven't had anything popped up, Christine. I'm just going to move on to our contact stuff.
Yeah, definitely. So this is contact information for myself, Christine Dunbeck. Again, I'm the Mars Solutions in the side panel if you're looking there. And then our speaker today, Merri. If you have any other questions or follow-ups and would like to reach out to either of us personally, here's our contact information, both our email address and our LinkedIn.
Yeah, and thank you everybody for your time today. We really appreciate it. And I appreciate your listening. It was fun to share this information and pull it together.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Merri, for presenting today. We appreciate everyone taking the time out of their busy schedule to sit in and listen with us. Stay tuned for upcoming topics as well. If you have any suggestions or requests for things, feel free to reach out to us. We love to receive those and help in any way that we can. There will be a follow-up email with the recorded session from today's webinar, and there will also be a follow-up email with a survey. So feel free to provide us some feedback. Let us know how we did, how we can improve, and if there's anything else that you'd like to hear about. Merri, is there anything else that you want to say before we sign off?
No, I think you covered it.
Perfect. Glad to hear. I haven't seen anything else pop up in the chat. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and let everyone continue with their day. But thank you so much again for attending, and I hope you enjoyed it.